Atheist Experience. Today is Sunday, May 19th, 2019. I'm Tracie Harris, and with me today is co-host Jen Peeples.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
All right.
Glad to have you here. The Atheist Experience is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a Texas nonprofit educational organization dedicated to the separation of religion and government and the promotion of positive atheist culture. You can come down and join us tonight after the show at the Free Thought Library on Koenig. And we do take donations for the dinner, but we also offer that free to the public. So if you want to come on down, there is absolutely no obligation. Join us for some food and some chat and some fun and just to hang out a little bit.
And we don't know what we're having yet, is that right?
I don't know what's for dinner, but it's usually good.
But there'll be something.
Yeah.
And worst case, there's leftover donuts. So.
That Jen had earlier. Yeah, there you go. Woo. So we don't really have any special announcements today, but you have a topic.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about some of these abortion restrictions that are passing.
Fun times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very fun times that you and I are not autonomous human beings.
No.
Apparently.
Yeah.
No, the three states I wanted to talk about briefly. Georgia. It's a fetal heartbeat law that just passed, which basically means that abortion's only legal up to about 6 weeks. So about the time a woman finds out she's pregnant, she can no longer have an abortion. There are exceptions in the Georgia law for cases of rape or incest, but only if the victim has filed an official police report, which is problematic because a lot of rapes are never reported for lots of reasons. In the Georgia law, abortion is punishable by up to 10 years in prison, but it's unclear who'd be charged, whether it be the woman, the doctor, or both. So that's actually...
It's surreal.
It is. That is, as some people have pointed out, the punishment for having an abortion after being raped in these states is actually more than a rapist would get, assuming you could get a conviction for it. In Alabama, the 6-week abortion ban kicks in. So it's basically you can get an abortion up to 6 weeks or up until the point you find out you're pregnant. So
yeah, that was just bizarre, but yeah.
Yes, and that is literally what the guy said. And it was a man saying this, that a woman can, of course, have any procedure she wants up until she knows she's pregnant. Yeah. Pro tip, dude, women don't go around having preemptive abortions. You know, there's no such thing. There are no exceptions for rape or incest. And in Alabama, this is a Class A felony. It's punishable by up to 99 years in prison for the doctor.
Yeah.
So,
and I just want to say, like, I heard somebody trying to say that it was being spun as, oh, he's talking about things like Plan B. But I just want to, go look at the clip yourself because it's my recollection of it is exactly what you said, that he's just like, no, none of these, none of the abortion options are being withheld from women up until the time they know they're pregnant. Mm-hmm. And I'm just, it didn't sound to me like he was talking about a single option or, you know what I mean? It was like, oh, we're not stopping women from doing anything on the abortion front up until they know they're pregnant. It's like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I know what it means, but it makes no sense. So,
yeah, it's really bizarre. And like I said, no exceptions for rape or incest. So basically, as soon as you know you're pregnant, you can no longer have an abortion in Alabama. And as many people have pointed out, this up to 99 years in prison, that's far more than a rapist would get for raping and impregnating a woman.
Yeah.
So it's basically open season on women. Missouri just passed an 8-week abortion ban, which has provisions because it's going to get challenged. And so they've got a heartbeat rule in there. So just for people that are confused about this, what's being called a heartbeat is actually electrical activity from a primitive structure that will become a heart at some point. It's not an actual beating heart, okay? It is detectable electrical activity. But people have this idea that it's this teeny tiny little baby in there, with all its fingers and toes and stuff like that. And that's what people are getting emotionally connected to. That's not what a fetus looks like at 6 weeks. It's
Yeah, I mean,
um,
it's just
but
the other thing is I remember seeing one of the legislators saying like, and this is how we gauge, like protecting life and whatnot. And I was like, no, it's not. It's brain activity.
yeah,
And they don't just check for a heartbeat,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have like some kind of autonomic nervous system stuff going on, but there's not brain activity in other
Right.
parts of your brain where you're going to come back and actually, ever be aware.
right,
Generally, they're just like, hey, this person is gone.
yeah, and this whole fetal pain thing. There's actually no evidence that a fetus feels pain until. Yeah, I think the earliest point at which those structures even exist that could transmit pain signals are like 28 weeks. Some people say 30 or even 32 weeks is the earliest. So,
But I saw somebody stand up on a town hall. It was like a Pennsylvania town hall, and she was just like, I want to, deal with this with facts. And she said, the heartbeat is at X weeks and the feels pain at X weeks, and it's, human. And I just thought, okay, this guy over here is a human being. He's got a heartbeat. He feels pain. Can he use your body without your consent?
Right.
Is that cool?
yeah.
It's just weird. It's like, yeah, they're facts, but maybe use relevant facts.
Well, and that actually brings up something I wanted to talk about because there's actually relevant case law in this. This is a case from 1978. It actually went to court. Okay, so in this case, a guy named Robert McFall, who's 39 years old, was diagnosed with a rare form of blood cancer called aplastic anemia. And in order to survive, he needed a bone marrow transplant. And so he went to his siblings. They tested all his siblings. None of them were a match. They finally tested a cousin, a guy named David Shemp, who was in fact a match. It was a very good match. And anyway, after going through the testing and determining that Shemp was a match, they said, hey, let's schedule this bone marrow transplant because your cousin, Robert McFall, is going to die if he doesn't get this. With the transplant, he would have a 50 to 60% chance of surviving, okay? Shemp said, you know what? I don't want to do it. And the reason he said he didn't want to do it is because he had a dream in which he dreamed that he wouldn't ever come out of the bone marrow donation procedure if he went through with it. And he was married and had kids, and he didn't want to die. And so he refused. Well, this caused like a major rift in the family. And after failing to prevail on him to do the donation, even after doctors explained that it's virtually painless for the donor, he's under anesthesia and there's pain relief and everything, and it wouldn't hurt him, he still refused. So the family, out of desperation, took him to court, and they sued him in court. And the judge came back and said, I find his position morally indefensible, but you can't compel the guy to donate, part of his body to sustain another person's life, even if they're going to die without it.
Yeah.
And so he ruled against McFall, and that ruling came down on, I think, like late July, and McFall died August 10th of that year. So it was, he definitely needed it. But this illustrates how it's very well established in law that you don't require someone to donate any part of their body to someone else, even if that person will die without it. And that's the situation we're in when it comes to an unplanned or unwanted pregnancy. Women are being required to allow another human to use their body in order to not die. That to me is morally indefensible. If I don't have the same bodily autonomy, at least as a corpse, that's pretty gross. And that's the situation we're in.
Yeah, I remember talking about a procedure that I found that was really strange. I think I heard about it on NPR, and I looked into it. And it was just sort of like this time frame where they did this procedure, which was hooking up a baby to the mother to act as a life support system. This is before they had like actual life support systems they could put you on while they did a surgery or whatever. And she just acted like the heart pump to, you know, keep the baby alive. And the women needed to consent to this. It's like, this is the mother, this is the baby, this is the baby's life. And she needed to consent to be hooked up to the baby in order to supply it, you know, like blood, tissue, you know, use of her organs in order to sustain it through the surgery. And you just wonder, it's like, why did she need to sign a consent form?
Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean? Like, what's the purpose of the consent form? And it's because you have to consent to this.
Yes.
Even if it's your own child, you know?
Yes.
Just,
And, you know, I think you've stated this very eloquently many times, is that it's just a fact of biology that if a fetus is removed from its mother's body prior to a certain point in gestation, it will die. That's just biology. And it's unfortunate for the fetus, but
yeah, women didn't get to vote on that. People with a uterus didn't get to vote on that.
Right.
It's like, that's how it works.
and for the people that say, but surely you don't support abortion right up to the point of birth, there is no such thing, okay? Post-viability, it's called C-section or induction, okay? And the times when you get to make that choice, or, you know, when you have to make that choice in late term, it's not something that women are doing on a whim that, oh, God, I just forgot to get that abortion. Let me go in and get this late term procedure that, by the way, involves delivering a stillborn child, okay? Because that's how you get the baby out of your body at that point in gestation. So, I mean, none of this stuff is something that women do on a whim. Are there some people that are irresponsible? Of course. But restricting abortion access is not the way to make people more responsible. And if somebody's that irresponsible, do you actually want them to raise a child? I mean, come on.
It's an interesting, you know, one of the interesting subtext is that by promoting that women can't make responsible decisions about their own bodies, what you're actually promoting is that women in no way would be responsible to trust with seats of government.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this is a way to undermine women's competency like all the way around. It goes beyond just reproductive choices. If I can't even make healthcare decisions about myself, if I have to be told what to do with my body because I'm just, you know, I can't figure it out, you know, whether or not I should have a medical procedure. What does that say about as a society, how does that undermine people's confidence in women and their competency?
Yeah. Well, and another thing I would point out that's a little bit more ominous, but it's this. If the state can tell you that you can't have an abortion, that same state can tell you that you must have an abortion. If they can control that aspect of your life, then they have control over the whole thing.
It's always weird how that works, right? So somebody was talking about, they had somebody, I guess, that was on social media that was arguing about whoever's the biological, you know, sperm donor for this, you know, new human being, that they should have some say in whether or not, like, the pregnancy goes forward or not, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just like, how does that even work, right? Because these things only work in their heads one way, right? So basically they would say, oh, I want the guy to be able to step in and stop her from having an abortion because he wants her to have the baby. And it's like, so, but what if he steps in and says, I don't want a kid, so she has to abort?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not really, you can't give somebody, that's not giving somebody a say in it, that's giving them control of it.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
You can't.
Well, and there was one guy, and I can't remember which state he was from, but he basically said that quiet part out loud, where he basically said, yeah, the woman's just the host. She actually needs the man's permission to do whatever she wants to do.
I'm sure there's some folks
like,
that feel that way. I saw a pro-lifer on one of the networks, and they were, or I guess it was a cable channel. I guess it's not a network. I don't know. Maybe they are networks. But they were talking about the one young woman, the 12-year-old that had gotten pregnant via repeated rape. And one of the things that the pro-lifer said was, because the person that was the host described that situation, and she's like, well, this bill has no exception for rape. Like, surely you don't condone, forcing somebody. Do you support that part of the bill that, would require this person, this 12-year-old, to carry to term? And the guy said, well, you're talking about an innocent child there in the womb.
Yeah.
And I just it floored me.
Yeah.
Because I thought he's talking about this child, and of course there should be, but no.
Yeah.
No, so the person doing the interview did call that out and say, the 12-year-old is an innocent child too.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, yeah, let's hand wave that. But it's just something else. I don't know.
Well, and I guess I'd like to...
At least he's consistent, right?
Yeah. But I'd like to wrap this segment up by pointing out that some of the people that voted against the Alabama bill introduced legislation that would require the state to pay for the medical expenses of any child that the state forced a woman to have under this law, pay for all of the health care and medical expenses of any child born under this law until the child was at least 3 years old. And that was voted down like 23 to 8 or something like that.
Yeah, it's not about concern for the life of a child.
Yeah,
not
so they absolutely do not care
it's
about the
about
child.
punishment, man.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. All of it is geared toward making sure that you do have accidents and that you are supremely punished for them.
Well, yeah, because if you wanted to reduce the number of unplanned pregnancies and therefore reduce the need for abortion, you would do what Colorado did, which is make long-term birth control free and easily accessible to, especially to teenage women, but to any woman who needed it.
It's just a don't have sex, and if you do have sex, you need to pay for it.
Yeah. And, of course, now they're making a child into a punishment that a woman has imposed on her
it's a little
for
blessing.
having sex.
It's a little blessing.
It's a blessing, but it's a punishment.
Yeah, and with that, we actually have a call that segues into this. Normally, I go ahead and start and go through the theist callers, but we actually have an atheist on the line who wants to talk about abortion rights strategies on keeping abortion legal. Hi, Nicolas. You're on with Jen and Tracie.
Hi.
Hey.
Very nice to talk to you. It's a huge honor to speak with you. I've been following the show for many years.
Cool. All right.
So thanks a lot first. So, of course, probably for the same reasons you started the show by addressing this topic, I've been significantly triggered by the recent bans and bills that have been passed. Just to give a little background of where I'm coming from, I'm a physician from Argentina. I'm currently doing my psychiatry residency in Miami. So basically, I could not add any other argument than the ones you already expressed. I watched many of your arguments at other times about this topic. I honestly fully agree with all of them. So just at this time, I think it's very significant for not just the topic of women's rights, but also about the atheist perspective on religion and how religion influences policy. I think it's very connected how certain religious or doctrines influence this kind of political movements. And after so many years, I think around 40, of full access to abortion rights in the U.S., I am very surprised and shocked by what's been going on recently. Just the idea of my wife potentially being raped and then raped a second time by a government forcing her to continue that pregnancy terrifies me. Imagining that from a woman's perspective, I can only think it would be even worse. So far, what I've been trying to do, I recently started a few online projects, one in Spanish for Argentina, one in English with a co-resident that is called The Skeptic Side. in which the first episode we are discussing this very same issue and sort of argumenting. My co-resident is very good at finding holes in arguments, so I would go ahead with all the line of argumentation you've been referring to before. And he would try to find any sort of holes in that argument. He could not do that. I'm trying also to speak. So as a man, I like to think myself at least as an ally of feminism. And I try more recently to speak more with men than with women about feminism. I think it could be a more effective way to help with the cause.
Well, thank you.
Same thing. Yes, I think that's the best thing I could do. I'll finish right away. But basically, also, thanks to your show, I recently volunteered to Recovering from Religion.
Oh, great.
Yeah, very good.
When I finish residency, I'm a licensed therapist, I'll probably join the secular therapy group. I think that these are very connected fights. The fight against religious doctrines and the fight for women's rights. So my question is, those are the things I've been doing so far, trying to speak with other men and try to have good arguments about these issues. What else do you think would be helpful to sort of like, for instance, at this time in the U.S., sort of regain those conquered rights that are now at risk in the country?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And I think there are so many things. I understand you're not a U.S. citizen. Is that correct?
I'm not what, sorry?
I understand you're not a U.S. citizen. Is that correct?
No, I am not. I'm from Argentina. I'll probably stay after residency, but
okay.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, so...
I cannot vote at this time.
So voting is huge. But, I mean, if you can't vote yourself, you can still support candidates who are pro-choice in other ways. So I would recommend, reaching out to candidates, finding out what their positions are, and supporting them in other ways. Certainly, your ability to provide compassionate care to your patients, and you're likely to see a lot of women who are traumatized by some of these laws. I think that'll go a long way toward helping mitigate some of the damage. And as far as reversing it, really, all of these laws that have been voted on by these legislatures, they're all going to be enjoined. The goal here is not necessarily to win on this round. They're trying to get these to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
And they want to overturn Roe.
Yeah, and I mean, anything that even gets shot down comes with an opinion, right? So it's almost like if you're writing a book and you're sending it to publishers and they write back to you and they give you feedback on it, and it helps you maybe re-hone your book and make it better. And that's what these laws are about. You send it to the Supreme Court, and the law gets shot down, and hooray, the law got shot down, but then they get information from these justices that basically helps them craft legislation that gets better, and then they can pass that next time. They look at where the judges criticized it, and we can maybe tweak that part of it, and so what they're trying to do is find out how much restriction can we get away with.
Yeah, and they've been chipping away at this for a long time. They found a really great tactic with the trap laws.
Oh yeah,
the targeted regulation of abortion providers. I mean, abortion is an incredibly safe outpatient procedure, and they've made it sound like it's oh my God, you're risking your life just by walking in the clinic. Yeah, and it's a really simple procedure.
As opposed to a 9-month gestation and a childbirth and 17 hours of labor, which is just a cakewalk.
Yeah.
Never hurt anybody.
I find that confusion very frequently with late-term abortion, which is not really an abortion, but either an induced labor or C-section.
Yeah.
That's huge in people's perception of how medicine works in that.
But I think information is a good thing, right? So I think most folks aren't supportive of these laws, and I think the good news is that when people see the laws that are this, I'm using the word comical, not because I think it's funny, but it's just such an absurd degree. There's such absurd legislation. I do think that, like, even when the Alabama law came out, right, there were a lot of people that would love to see a total ban on abortion who said, oh, this is going too far, right?
Yeah.
And some folks posted that and said, look, even Pat Robertson says this is too restrictive. And it's like, no, Pat Robertson is saying this is too restrictive to pass.
Right.
He's not saying it's too restrictive for his goals, right?
Right.
So
Correct.
he understands the optics of this, and that when you push something like that, it gets a lot of negative publicity. So people look at it and they say, whoa, wait, no, incest and rape, like children, 12-year-olds, and and so this makes people recoil, and this actually can have like a negative backlash for their effort, because it makes public sentiment kind of say, wow, this is really messed up, right? Because it is messed up.
Yes.
And I think that when you're out there, when you talk to people, and that's the thing. So we saw in Alabama, like, it was a woman governor that signed it into law after, like, 25 dudes, made it law. So you've got all sorts here. There's definitely conservative women, but I do think that a lot of this, and we have to affect all those minds. But I do think. It's not an issue maybe that a lot of men consider too deeply, because, and to be fair, it's because they don't have to consider it as deeply, right? I mean, all of us are more invested and more thoughtful and spend more time dealing with stuff that actually impacts us in our lives. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's just how people are. The things that impact you more directly are the things you put more interest and time into, because you have to, right? You've got to deal with the things that affect your life first. So I get this. And so when you're talking to other men, I think that's a good thing, because this might be an issue where they understandably aren't putting as much, thought or attention. And so when somebody just has like a single conversation that might make them understand one or two points with a little more clarity, I think that does a lot, because then it's just like, you know what, I talked to somebody about this, and when I saw that, this sounded good until they explained this or that to me, and suddenly I'm not as into that anymore. I don't think that's right based on the conversations that we had. And so I do think that those conversations, especially with other men, are a good thing, because it raises the issue with people that don't normally have to confront it head on. And so I think that's probably a real positive thing, because public sentiment is going to play a big role in this. It's like ultimately the justices are going to make these decisions, but it's the legislators that write the laws that we put into office that are driving the laws that go to SCOTUS.
Yeah.
Correct. By the end of the day, both society and the political world are made up of individuals with individual ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that makes a lot of sense. So I do feel I'm on the right track.
Yeah, I think you're doing
definitely.
great.
And I appreciate, I take a lot of things you mentioned that I hadn't thought about regarding how to have a better impact in the public opinion on certain issues. I do appreciate that. I don't know if it is to ask for too much. It's not strictly related to abortion rights, but it has to do with some struggle I have with some patients of mine that are believers. And I do get to a point, so I do both psychiatric medication management and therapy with some of my patients. Sometimes I do find certain patients that would, for instance, have such a strong religious beliefs that I can clearly see how much they are interfering with their well-being. For instance, I could have, without giving any specific information, I have a mom whose daughter is homosexual, and she, from the Catholic perspective, sees that as unnatural and morally unacceptable.
Yeah.
His daughter got married with another woman, and she is going through so much struggle. And from the medical profession, we have, so at baseline, there's so much reservation regarding how much to confront any sort of beliefs. Actually, having a religious belief in most psychiatry textbooks is considered a protective factor for suicide. So anytime I would want to suggest the possibility of maybe challenging, of course, compassionately and empathically, those beliefs, I do have some colleagues who would say, wait, hold on, you don't want to mess up with this protective factor. and I do experience that sort of conflicting situation in which I have trouble drawing the line from up to what point in that patient-physician relationship I am warranted to get into sort of doing something like what you guys do in the show,
Yeah.
which is arguing in a... Yeah, please.
So one of the things, so I'm going to do something that I may get hate mail for this, but I'm going to actually recommend that you talk to an Episcopal priest.
Mm-hmm.
The Episcopal Church...
I could try that.
Yeah, the Episcopal Church has actually been very open to LGBTQ people for a long time now. And if you talk to an Episcopal priest, that individual, he or she, may be able to give you some ideas about how to challenge this patient's harmful views of homosexuality from a religious perspective versus openly challenging the actual religious beliefs. And I don't know if that would be, effective or what, but it might break them away from the more harmful aspects of the religious beliefs. If they had another way of thinking about those religious doctrines.
That makes a lot of sense, because that would also be a way to sort of protect myself from sort of being, I don't know how to call it, proselytizing, or sort of like people being able to say I'm removing helpful beliefs from people, even though I have so many objections to whether or not they truly are helpful. But there's this sort of consensus in the mental health professional community that religious beliefs are something more positive than negative.
Yeah,
Personally, I do not share that.
Yeah, I haven't found that to be true.
But it's still, I agree with you. At the same time, I am sort of regulated by that community.
Right.
So that's when the conflict comes up.
Yeah, and that's why I think, if you get another perspective from a faith community that doesn't share this absolute condemnation of homosexuality, and Episcopalians, there's also the Lutherans, the Evangelical Lutheran Council of America. If you find a Lutheran priest, you talk to them about that, and maybe you go to multiple religious communities like that and get their perspective on this.
Perfect. I really appreciate that. I haven't thought of it. So,
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for your call.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor. So keep up with the good work.
Thanks, Nicolas.
Great, thanks.
Woo. Before we go on, I did want to talk about a call that happened last week and just kind of put some clarity around it, because it was a great illustration of something, right? So during a call that was earlier in the show, we talked a little bit about Gnostic atheism or Gnostic theism, Gnosticism versus agnosticism. And one of the things I said was that, we understand knowledge as a subset of belief. And to me, it's sort of, it's like a fuzzy line, right? When do you think you know something? When do you think you believe something? And believing it to me is that you accept it as true. So is that, how significant is that line? And where do you cross it? And it's just, it's not when a person feels comfortable saying they know something, it depends on a context sometimes, right? So one of the things that happened is, after I had talked to somebody about, having these honest calls and how, I really appreciate like a conversation more than somebody who calls in with this script and I'm supposed to say something, and then, and then I got a script call, and it was so interesting because it just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then I just finally hung up. And it's just like, how many times are we going to have this same exchange? And what the person was asking me was, do I believe that fairies exist, or do I believe there's no such thing as fairies?
Right.
And they were equating that to, well, what about your view on God?
Yeah.
And I actually have used those things in conjunction trying to explain my atheism. So when people say to me, are you Gnostic or agnostic? Because that knowledge line is so subjective to people, some people have different opinions on what that means. And if I say, yeah, I think I know it, then we'll start talking, and then I'll say something about it, and they'll say, well, I don't think that's claiming to know. And it's like, okay, well, so what I try to do is just give people an understanding of where I stand on it, and then I let them tell me. Like, you tell me if I'm a Gnostic atheist or an agnostic atheist based on how you think of knowledge, right? Because I'm just going to tell you how I view it. You can label it how you want. And so what I said was, I do accept that there's no such thing as gods, just like there's no such thing as fairies. And I accept those things for the same reasons, right? And to the same degree. And the reason I put it that way is because sometimes when I start to have a discussion and somebody wants to get into, well, you know, logically you cannot prove that there is no God. Well, logically I cannot prove there are no fairies. Like, I get that, right? And yeah, if I was confronted with a fairy or a God, I would totally be like, oh, hey, I was wrong. And to some people, that understanding about something where you're willing to say, I accept that from that logical framework I could be wrong, they'll say that's not knowledge. And that's fine. Okay, then to you I'm an agnostic atheist, right? But to somebody else who says, no, you're claiming that you know because, you know, that's what that means. And it's like, okay, then I'm claiming that I know. And if you don't accept fairies as real, then you understand all the same reasons and the degree to which I feel that way about your God.
Right.
And we can either talk about that or we don't have to talk about that. But if you understand your position on fairies and you're saying that's knowledge, you can't demonstrate it to me either, but you're accepting it, you know. And so my point partly to him at one point was to try to explain that my position on this is consistent, right? I'm saying that I do draw that parallel. I don't deny to him that I think I'm not saying I think one way about one thing and the other way about another thing. I'm just simply saying whether or not it's knowledge depends on who the person I'm talking to thinks of knowledge versus belief, and if they draw a line or don't draw a line or where they draw that line. And so I'm happy to, you know, say, yeah, to me that's parallel, and if that's what you want me to say, I'll say it. It's parallel for me in my head. The question to me then is, you know, as a Christian, how are these things not parallel to you? Like why do you see one as different? When, you know, and so we never really got that far because I just kept getting re-asked. But do you know? Do you know? And I was like, I'm telling you my perspective on it, and I'm not denying whatever it is you want to label it. I'm just saying this is how I'm viewing it. I'm being as honest as I can be. But the thing is, they just kept asking and asking. And the reason a person keeps asking something is because they're not getting a satisfying answer.
Right.
But it's the only honest answer I can give, right? And so I can't help a person who wants a different answer if the answer I'm giving is honest and it's not the answer they want. And so just kind of an FYI, that's what when someone calls with a script in their head, that's what it looks like. Right? It's just they're getting really, you know, if I answered it incorrectly or in a way that made him think I didn't understand the question, he would have reframed the question, right? Then you would say, oh, no, wait, you misunderstood me, and here's what I was trying to say, and I think you didn't understand. And that's a whole other issue, and that does happen in an honest conversation where somebody might reframe and re-ask something. But this is not that. This is just asking again and again because you're just trying to make me say a thing.
It's the Ray Comfort, have you ever told a lie? You know, and when you say, well, yes, of course, and doesn't that make you a liar?
When I'm telling a lie, yep. But not when I'm telling the truth.
Yeah, so yeah, you didn't follow the script, and so he got frustrated.
And that's what a dishonest call looked like. So just FYI. And with that, let's go ahead and take Saad, who we've talked to before. You're in Pakistan, and you want to talk about the origin of the universe through logic and why you have a theory that works better than another theory, I guess. And you're on with Tracie and Jen. Hi, Saad. Hello? I hear something. I don't hear a person, though.
Yeah.
Saad, are you on the call? Can you hear us? Going once? Going twice? All right. Well, we gave it a shot. Sorry that there was a problem with the connection. Better luck next time. So we're going to move on to Rob in New York and Long Island, and you have evidence about the Bible, and you're on with Tracie and Jen.
How you doing, Miss Peeples? How you doing, Jen? I'm just trying to keep good. Being the second caller is hard. You touched upon a couple of tough subjects, things that I don't talk about, and I'm aware of. But I'm a feminist.
Good.
I really am.
Okay.
Pretty much counter to the psychiatrist who said he's a feminist. And the only way I can relate to put a spin on what the topic was is the only way you can really discuss that subject of motherhood is through personal stories. To use the medical procedure is a poor example of what we're talking about, I think. And that's the difference of why people defend or want the law to be changed, and because of the
But people don't want the law to be changed.
Oh, well, we want the law to be changed.
Well, yes, I understand you do, but the majority of people in this country don't want abortion laws to be changed.
I'm not aware of that statistic. I think that was a...
Then you need to pay more attention, because polls are very consistent. There's overwhelming support for continuing to make abortion legal.
I've never seen, I glanced through the papers. I haven't seen a poll on abortion in a long time.
Yeah, they do them repeatedly.
I've seen it on opioids,
It's a hot topic.
addictions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's a hot topic, especially...
Yeah, they do a lot of public
three
polling on
laws
it. Yeah.
the 3 states brought in. But once again, it's a personal story. If you want
That's
to...
fine. I mean, I'm sure they have personal
story,
stories in Canada.
Yeah,
they don't have laws governing abortion there.
we're not talking about laws. We're talking about the women who have had
Right.
them.
Women have had them in Canada, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They've had them everywhere. Once
Right.
again,
And they don't
I
need
know
laws
personal-
there. They don't have laws there. They don't need them here.
I can only relate to the personal stories of the women I know. Now, if you want, so why would I say, well, this statistic counters to the personal stories that I know? Why would I say it? Because they don't agree.
I don't know what you mean about, like,
Yeah,
they don't agree. And I don't even know, like, so a person has a personal story. There are lots of personal stories, I'm sure.
But that's what I'm saying. To talk about the issue of motherhood compared to abortion.
No, we're not talking about motherhood compared to abortion. We're talking about the right to bodily autonomy.
Right.
All right, if you want to call it bodily autonomy.
It's
that's
called
fine.
bodily autonomy.
Yeah, if you want to talk about it in the sense of medicine or the removal of the fetus, it's totally out of character of what the nature of the procedure is. If
No, it isn't.
Women, yes, it is.
No.
It's an unfamiliar. It's if you talk to women that have had them, or you've known what their condition is.
What makes you think we've never? I have friends who have had abortions and friends who have had children. What makes you think I don't have friends who have had them?
Yeah, I've actually
Very good.
worked as an escort at an abortion clinic.
I know friends who have had abortions who feel like that was the best decision they ever made, and I have friends who feel bad about it. It just depends on the person.
That's what we're talking about.
No, it's not.
No,
what
it's
we're,
not.
What we're talking about is it's their choice. It was their choice. And it should remain their choice. They should choose to have the child or to not have the child.
All right. We can leave it. It's a personal story, but if you want to go statistically, since we've allowed that procedure into the system, let's say the incidence of childhood violence has risen. A lot of things
No, it hasn't.
changed.
No, it absolutely has not. And in fact, there's some statistics out there that show that about 17 years after Roe v. Wade became the law of the land, teenage violence dropped precipitously. And part of the reason for that was that a bunch of unwanted kids were not born.
Teenage violence is still there, and I'm talking about...
It's very low now compared to what it was in the early 90s.
Take care of children. Do you talk to police officers at all?
Yes.
I think the thing that's
anybody's
weird to
story?
me is that it seems like these children that are being treated violently couldn't be treated violently unless somebody chose to have a child.
Yeah.
So you're basically making an argument that people who decided to have
Now-
kids
now
are
you're saying
are
that people
over
who
are
had the child shouldn't have the
disproportionately.
child. I'm sorry.
You're saying that people who chose to have children have somehow elevated child violence, which means that maybe more people should be having abortions.
Yeah.
No, maybe in the back of if you put into the context of thought, well, gee, I could have had an abortion instead of. There's a lot of what people think in their minds and
Anybody can have an abortion, whether it's
well-
legal or not. It doesn't have to be legal for somebody
Right.
to think I could have had an abortion. Making it illegal doesn't make it inaccessible.
I can only go by the statistics.
No, this is
These
a
are, you
reality.
don't have any statistics.
It's like saying drugs are illegal, so there are no drugs in the U.S., right? Because it's illegal, so there are none. No
actually,
one's
drug
doing
use
drugs.
Actually, drug use and opioid deaths gone up. So
Well, what I'm saying though is
can't
your
argue with
argument
that
that
argument.
if
I know what that is.
if it's legal, people will think I could have had an abortion, and I'm saying whether it's legal or not, people could have had an abortion. I mean,
if you diminish motherhood, because that's what you're talking about does, the removal of a fetus from a
No,
woman's
it doesn't.
body. If it,
It absolutely does not
I
diminish
think
motherhood.
Word.
forcing people to have babies diminishes motherhood.
Yeah.
teenage pregnancy's gone up, abortions have gone up.
Yeah, teenage
Well, what used to
pregnancies
be
have
40
gone up
has gone-
because
you know,
access to birth control has been limited by people who want to punish people for having sex.
How does this prove the Bible?
more birth
Yeah.
control out there now than there ever was before.
It's not as accessible as it should be. And you
Therefore,
know what
Jesus.
happens when it is accessible? Go take a look at what happened in Colorado. When they made birth control universally available to teenage girls, guess what happened to the unplanned pregnancy rate and the abortion rate in Colorado?
Went down.
Yes, it did. You think they
And
stopped
how many
having
years
sex?
Can a woman stay on the pill?
How many years can a woman stay on the pill? As long as she
Or-
wants.
That's not what I've heard. Actually, I've met a few women.
You don't know jack shit,
I don't
dude.
talk about my age, but I'm going to say I'm into my 50s and I'm on hormonal birth control. So, yeah, I take that to the bank.
And I've also met women that that have had problems from it too.
Yeah, and there are people who have problems from Lipitor, but they still give it to people.
Yeah.
Well, there's a big difference between Lipitor and birth control.
No,
All right, so you gotta-
they're
Yeah, you're
different
right. Birth
drugs.
control is safer than Lipitor.
I'm not fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Birth control pills are safer than Tylenol.
How?
And this is why Nicolas is doing such a good thing talking to men.
Yeah.
Just saying. Thank you, Nicolas.
Him? I don't think he really understands that much because
I think you should spend an hour with him.
Yeah.
I've talked to plenty of psychiatrists. There are ones who are
I bet you
doctors
have.
Yeah, but there are psychologists that pray before you go into their counseling. which
I
is
prefer
basically
psychologists who are sure
Yeah.
in their skills.
well, just as skilled. There are psychologists in this country that travel the world helping trauma victims
Sure.
who've
Yeah.
been raped, who've been murdered.
Yep.
And they're Catholics.
Okay.
They're a
Yeah,
Catholic
so?
organization. So, nickel and dime, a woman who has a religious or any person has a religious background in a world where secularity is really up there on the list of popularity right now and is having problems grappling with society, yeah, you're going to have a problem there. You
realize most people are theistic still.
If marriage isn't
Yeah.
necessary anymore, because and the word religion.
I'm sorry that
not
your
even
childhood comfort things are going away.
Yeah.
Huh? Why did you say these are my childhood comfort things?
Didn't you just say something about do you don't have to get married anymore? And it's like, yeah, these are things that are becoming antiquated. Yes.
They're not antiquated. It's like a.
You just said it was. You
system.
just finished saying it's going away.
Well,
What do you
sure
think
it is.
antiquated means?
It could be a phase. You ever heard of a phase?
I don't see this coming back.
Yeah.
You don't see marriage coming back.
Not in the way you're thinking. I think the types of marriages that are coming are not what you're envisioning. But
I think with the ones that you're envisioning are going to fail. It's not. It's
the ones that you envision fail. Hello, I'm divorced.
They only started failing 40 or 50 years ago. That's not a long time. For something that's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah, people are now allowed to actually get out of unhappy relationships, and so they do.
Yeah.
What causes the unhappy relationship? That's another
Probably husbands like you.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, because I wouldn't
What?
last 5
You
minutes.
think I come home? You think I come home and pop on the TV set? Do I walk around the house?
No, I think you walk around saying that a woman isn't even a human being because you've heard stories.
I don't know what you're talking about. Those are women that tell these stories. My wife has always been an opinion in my life. To say that behind every good man isn't a good woman, or behind every good woman isn't a good man, is kind of a little...
All right, are we going to talk about the Bible?
Yeah,
Because this is going south fast.
Yeah, I know. It's just when you come in after a caller, it's a little bit different. It's difficult.
Yeah, well, we've got other callers, so let's hit your topic.
All right. Oh, God. I think... I lost my train of thought. I think we should say, as far as the Garden of Eden goes, that the forbidden fruit that was eaten, and this is what I was given. In the beginning, God didn't even tell anybody about the forbidden fruit. It was found by accident.
Who told you that?
God.
I thought he told them that they could eat of any tree except for that one.
Yeah.
That was just a small part of the story.
Right, but it's
We're always
still
talking-
part of the story, right? I mean, you're basically saying that God didn't tell them about the tree, and I think he told them it was forbidden.
There were other people in the garden, weren't there?
It's not in the story.
It depends who you listen to. There's a lot of...
Well, I'm just looking at, this is about the Bible being true, right? Wasn't that your call? Like, I'm looking at, like, the Bible story. There was no children until after they left the garden.
Yeah.
Or did you hear a different story, maybe from one of those women you talked to?
Yeah.
No,
You got to remember they lie, right? Like,
there are
evil
some
leads you wrong.
There are Christian theologians that believe there was that there was a
All
civilization.
right, so is this evidence about the Bible, or is this evidence about a theological story that you heard somebody else tell?
Same thing. This is what was taught to me.
By who?
Originally, the first biting of the apple, nobody even knew what the forbidden fruit was. It was discovered by accident.
Yeah, but it doesn't even say it's an apple. It just said it was a fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That is a symbolism. Correct. If you wanted to say, did Jesus heal a blind man or walk on water? That is not symbolism. That is the true power of God. I can discern.
So the fruit is a symbol, but walking on water, that's totally fact.
That he did.
And how do we know this?
Parted the Red Sea.
And we know this. Wait, part of the Red Sea. Wait, that's the story of the Exodus.
Yeah.
Right, correct. Yeah.
Right, that's not historic fact.
Yeah, I know. That you don't like to hear, but let me see.
No, isn't fact. There's no history around this.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk, we can go back to Jesus. You talk about witnesses.
Yeah, we got to go back to Jesus because.
Yeah, we have to. Well, listen, it's a long history, 6,000 years, right?
We don't have that kind of time.
I know. Our last topic. All right, all the witnesses that saw Jesus, and that includes the apostles. You know, a lot of them were crucified, and to compare.
That's what
Harry
they say.
Potter, compare Harry Potterism. That in thousands of years, people are going to look back. It's kind of like an irresponsible take on history. People died because of that religion.
Yeah, people die because of all kinds of religions.
Yeah.
Persecution, big difference there.
People killed because of that religion.
That's correct. But he knew he was going to die anyway. He did. That's the way it was written.
Yeah, this is a story. Yeah, but okay, are we just going to go through what the Bible claims, or is there anything that we're going to hit that's actually evidence for the Bible being correct?
The way I see the picture of your groups is, you want to be ex-children of God. That's put it differently. You used to call it atheism.
You don't get to tell people what they think about, like whatever.
No. In the end, when all is said and done, I will have a way to prove to you that you are related to God. And it'll be a simple test.
Can I do it through 23andMe?
What?
Yeah.
No, I never watched that.
Okay. If this is a troll
really,
call,
I
it's
have
actually
a
pretty
test to
funny.
prove
Yeah.
We're all children of God.
Okay.
You could sit there, you could talk, I don't know how many years you've been on the air, but all the conversations
Feels like forever.
Yeah. All the conversations you have, I could prove that you're wrong.
Okay, well, let's just try one.
Yeah, your best one.
Best what?
Best
No, really,
piece of evidence.
There's a machine that will test you to see if there's God in you.
Really, where do I find this machine?
Is this another woman's story?
No, it's not.
Okay, where's the machine?
I can't tell you how the test is going to be because pretty much have to talk to sexuality.
I'm starting to think that I think I'm being trolled.
Yeah, it does feel like a troll.
No, you're not. If you don't think I'm serious?
No, I'm going to have to say no. So we're moving on to Saad has called back. Saad, let's see if we've got you on. It's about the universe. Hey, you're on with Jen and Tracie. Hey.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened last time.
That's
I must have
okay.
dozed off.
That's all right.
It's 3 a.m. here.
So what's going on?
Okay.
So, I just wanted to kind of talk to you about, so I know we've talked about so many things. We talked about the origin of the universe the last time around, and we kind of came to the point where we said, okay, this is too much. This is something that may not be answered because it requires more of an expert opinion. But then I thought, why not tackle certain things based? Because I've always felt like with my faith, I've always kind of believed everything is true because of logic, and I've always tried to understand my faith through logic. Except only one thing that I can't really give you a real answer is the existence of God. It truly just requires blind faith, from what I've been told. But other than that, everything revolving, everything in the faith, I've always been able to get an understanding through logic, like why we fast. This is the month of fasting here. It is Ramadan, which is why I'm up right now. I actually have to prepare my fast right after this call. But why we have to pray 5 times a day and all sorts of things. I know I've discussed certain things with Matt as well, but I thought I'd run it by you.
Okay.
So basically, I mean, the idea of fasting, for example, because it's relevant to a lot of people, a lot of Muslims who are fasting this month. It's basically self-restraint, it's self-discipline. So you avoid eating and drinking and everything else that would be considered sinful. Your mileage may vary, but so in order to kind of and for the most part to humble yourself to those people who can't really afford a meal a day, because there are people, especially in my part of the world, who really can't afford. And in my city, Tracie, it's so hot, the weather. It's extremely difficult to for a lot of people, for most of the population to survive in this heat. But basically the whole point is that I'm a part of the educated class, so I'm so used to a privilege of bringing. So for us, it really makes us feel like we can't even stand a minute without the AC on in a car or in our offices. And once we're out, we're so exhausted. So it's basically an example of how one should discipline themselves. There's real logic behind doing it for 30 days. I don't know why 30 days has been chosen. There's probably a historical reason for that. But the actual reason behind the fasting, this is basically an example that I thought I'd explain to you.
Okay, and is that tied to the universe theory?
Well, in the sense that it comes from God. See, obviously, the whole point of the matter is that we have to believe in God, Tawheed, that there is no God but God. Only then, that's the foundation of Islam. That's what Islam was built on. And yes, there's the other half of the creed, which says that Muhammad was the messenger. When I was doing cross comparative studies of different faiths, I'm very fascinated by different religions of the world, especially Buddhism is something that I still am very fascinated by till today. So I've looked at the Judeo-Christian faiths the Abrahamic faith, as they called. I've looked at Judaism. I've looked at Christianity. In fact, in order to understand what these faiths are, I actually went to a church. I've been to a synagogue. I've had the Shabbat dinners. I've lived in the States. I've studied there. So I've spoken to people of different faiths. In fact, I've spoken to atheists too. And I think I remember mentioning to Matt that for 1 year I even lived with an atheist from Nepal.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's very open-minded, and I think that's good that you're willing to meet people and talk to people and consider different views. So what is this thing about the universe?
Well, I feel like, I always felt like there's so many unresolved mysteries. I mean, I know we can say that because there's no answer for what caused everything, we should attribute to God. But the fact of the matter is, who else, like I asked you last time, and I really don't have a better answer for this. Like, okay, the Big Bang Theory is the explanation of why the Earth exists today and why we are, but what really caused it? What was behind it?
Is it okay? Is it okay to, if you don't have the information to actually indicate an accurate answer, is it okay to say that you don't know?
Yes, I don't know, but in my faith, but if I just base it on faith, I have to say yes, it was God.
But you don't have to. You don't have to base it on faith, though. Yeah. That's the beauty part.
That's the thing is, like, I believe that God created the universe. I mean,
I guess you can.
I mean, we understand that, but the question I guess we're more interested in is why you believe that.
Well, you see, when I'm part of a faith, I know people like to criticize Islam a lot, and there's so many things that people will say is wrong, and I'm not going to debate. I'm not getting into that debate right now, But according to my own experiences, I have to attribute all of this to a creator, because that's, not just because my faith tells me, because everything else makes sense. Like, all of these have to come from a creator, because they were revealed to the prophet.
So here's the problem that we're going to have, though, Saad. Here's what the problem is. So we've got this void where there's no information, and where I'm saying, I don't know what this is, and really we don't know what it is. And you're saying, I believe that it's this creator, but I acknowledge that there's really a void of information here upon which to base the decision. I find that answer satisfying, right? It's like emotionally satisfying to me to think that a creator is responsible for that gap in our knowledge. And you can do that, but really I don't know what there is to talk about, right? Like, that's kind of the end of the conversation at that point.
I mean, I want you to pick your brain a bit. Like, if there is no creator behind the universe, then could we just believe that it just came out of nowhere?
Well, I'm saying you don't have to believe anything. You can say, I don't know what happened, and until we get information about what happened, I don't know. So it's almost like if you had a brother, for example, that disappeared one day, like just disappeared. Nobody knew what happened. He went out one night. He never came home the next day, and they never found him. And you could sit all day long and worry about what could have happened, right? And you can think to yourself, well, there's a picture of him getting dropped off at the nightclub, and then we never don't have any video footage of him leaving, and so we don't know what happened. You could come up with all kinds of ideas, and you could have all kinds of feelings, and you could think that it's emotionally satisfying to hope that he's still alive somewhere and that he's going to come back at some point. You could have all kinds of reactions to it, but the point is, if we're going to talk about what actually is true about what happened to your brother, if we don't have information, there's nothing I can say about it. Like, you could talk about what you believe, but I have no response because I've got no information.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. But okay. Here's what I would say, that there was the Quran, the book was revealed to the Prophet 700 something around that time AD. And really compares religious scholars that I've spoken to, or at least that I've heard, unbiased scholars, they've always, the information that I've gotten from them, even from them personally, is that the Quran, the way it was recorded and the way it exists today, it was the same as it was
Yes.
originally compiled versus the
Yes,
Bible
that is not
the Old
information from unbiased scholars. That is part of your mythology. It's part of the tradition. It's the same tradition that, people say, oh, well, the Bible is the inerrant word of God. And so what? It's a claim from a religious tradition.
It is, and I could point out tons of logical fallacies in the New Testament easily, especially the way it's compiled.
And so what?
Doesn't make sense to me even, even if I try to believe it.
And so what?
But so, in my opinion, if there's this book which I feel has so much truth in it, and it comes from a God, could we not say that this is the being that created the universe?
I'm sorry, what was that?
If I feel there's so much truth in what I believe in, and if we can prove that yes, the book that was revealed so many years ago, or so many centuries ago, is still the same as it was. If you could come up, if I could show you proof, or if you could come across proof, could we not say that this is from a creator?
No.
It just means, even if it hadn't changed in 700 years, even if we found a manuscript of it from 700 years ago that was identical, all we would be looking at is a book that hasn't changed in 700 years.
Yeah, but I understand it's very hard to attribute these things to creators, especially when when everything that at least from my conversation with atheists, it boils down to evidence and science. Like it has to be proven by science somehow or the other. The funny thing is, science is still not complete. There's still a lot of things that science is still trying to figure out.
Science. Do you even understand what we're talking about when we say science? It's not like a book that one day is going to be finished.
Right, but I mean, as far as what he's describing, yes, there are things we don't know. And in fact, we started with that part of the conversation. So again, if we're going to circle back, and if the point is going to be, I don't know what happened before Big Bang, or that there's not like a really solid theory on it, that's fine. I'll acknowledge that. But then I'm saying at that point, we just say, we don't know. I don't know what else there is to talk about.
But could you my I could say this would be my last question to you. If I could tell you all the beliefs, the entire belief system or the belief structure of my faith, and if all of those things make logical sense to you, do you think that if it makes logical sense and Islam says that it's from God, would you still give Islam the benefit of the doubt?
Would I still give what?
Islam the benefit of the doubt.
Islam.
I don't give anybody the benefit of the doubt. What you're basically saying is, what if something made sense? And I'll just say, off the bat, that I read like a Taoist book, and the thing to me was brilliant, right? Like it made perfect sense. It didn't make any supernatural claims. It just basically talked about perspective. And at the end of it, I was just like, wow, I feel like that was like an incredibly relevant book for me, even though it was written many, many years ago. And some Buddhist texts are like that for me. Like I'll read them and be like, oh, that's super relevant even today. Like I really, and Aesop's fables, right? Like I'll read those and be like, oh, I totally relate to that still. I don't think that it takes a god to say things that make sense. Even thousands of years ago, people, I'm sure, were able to make sense sometimes, right?
Well, yeah, there were a lot of smart people. There's smart people in every century, I'm sure of it. I mean, if there's people like Aristotle and Socrates so many centuries ago, then I'm sure they existed even then.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I read it all and I thought, wow, this book makes sense, I've read old, really old books that I think make sense. And for example, there's like some Hindu books that are like stories. And those don't not make sense, right? Like they make sense to me because they're stories. So, it's kind of a weird thing. I don't know that is a demonstration. I would say it's not a demonstration of a God. It might be an interesting book. It might be a relevant book. It might resonate today, which would be really great that somebody penned something down that resonated, even today. There are some folks that do that, but I don't know that it's evidence of a God.
Yeah. It's the same thing when I talk to people of different faiths. They seem to defend it with such conviction that sometimes you just have to say, okay, fine, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, and that's it. And the beautiful thing about this, even Islam says the same thing too. The Quran has a line, and there's no compulsion in religion, which I feel is really cool, because even we're not supposed to tell people that you're wrong. We're supposed to show them, okay, this is the book. If it makes sense to you, believe it. We're not gonna. I don't understand that there's criticism about it of people or Muslims who have forced people into conversion, but those are people who are part of the faith, not the faith itself.
Well, if you're like not supposed to force people and you're just supposed to tell them about it, you have done your duty.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I've done my job here, but I'm not here to preach here at all. I'm not here to convert you guys into Islam or anything. And because I myself am not the most perfect Muslim, believe me, I don't pray 5 times prayers a day. I'm only praying it this month because everybody becomes a bit more, a bit more obedient
Sure.
and a bit more religious this
I understand. All right. Well, hey, we've got some other callers on the line, so thanks for your call, Saad.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot for debating. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, cool. We're going to move on to, I think it looks, is that Vivian in the UK? Wants to talk about decline of civilization with Tracie and Jen?
Oh, hello.
Hello. Did I say your name right?
Yeah, my name's Vivian.
Oh, it's spelled a little, okay.
V-I-V-I-A-N.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
should be a V.
no, I just wanted to say that, I'm extremely disappointed with Matt Dillahunty and the ACA and trans rights are human rights.
Okay. You wouldn't get any disagreement. You wouldn't get any disagreement from the two of us regarding trans rights.
So. Both of you are pretty awesome generally. I don't know what your stance is on the current controversy, but it's been a roller coaster ride, and I hope that all the ACA employees that are getting so much harassment get the support they need to.
Yeah, I mean, I can only reiterate that I have full support for the trans community.
Yeah.
Even though they've told us that the hosts have free reign to do whatever content they want to do when they're on the show, and that, they don't want us to feel, what's the word, I guess, moderated. I do want to say that I don't feel completely at ease talking about it because my views don't necessarily align with the group, and I feel on this topic I can't speak for the ACA, and I feel like my job at this desk on this show right now is to do my best to speak for the association and probably not to speak against it. And so what I'm trying, I guess, I appreciate your call, but I feel unable to express my views.
Well, you probably shouldn't say any more then. I wouldn't want to get you in trouble. Thank you very much.
We're not in trouble.
Yeah, I just don't want to make problems. So,
but thank you for the call.
I appreciate it.
And we agree, trans rights are human rights.
Woohoo! Go trans rights.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you. Woo. All right. So moving on, we're gonna go to. This is Asad in Minnesota. You're a Muslim who is on the brink of atheism, and you have a question. You're on with Tracie and Jen. Asad?
Hello, Tracie.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes, you sound great. Thank you.
Okay. I have a few questions. But before I go into the question about Islam, I was listening this show in the beginning, and you're talking about abortion, and I also have a few questions. So
Okay.
can I? Okay, so I listen to the points for abortion, and I feel, sometimes I feel that yes, a woman should have option to if they want to. But my question is about the arguments. So what I'm trying to say is you could have a valid something could be valid, but you could make bad argument for it. Correct?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm. So when I hear you talk, I try to process and for example, you Jen, you say if like for example in this show it says you say if they could force you not to have abortion, they could also force you to have abortion, right?
Yes.
But I'm not, again, for or against abortion, but you could apply it for any law. So if you could say, if they could force you not to commit murder, they could also force you to commit murder, correct?
Well, that's not exactly the same because you're not talking about control of your own body. And
No, I understand. I'm talking about the...
And there is actually
logic.
a precedent. There is actually a precedent. The government can force people to kill people. If they draft you into the army and send you to the battlefield, you can be forced to kill people. Now, defining that as murder, international law doesn't define that as murder. But you could be forced to take another life.
I think it's more along the lines. I mean, this is like a health decision, right? So,
Right.
so the government, if the government decides for you that you're not allowed to have like a medically safe procedure that actually protects you from potential harm, it's almost like if the government banned vaccines, right? And it's like there's a big argument now about whether they can force people to have their children vaccinated. Like, should we make people have their kids vaccinated? Should we leave that to the parents? I think if the government were to say, we're going to ban vaccines, people would probably, by and large, crap themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just like, wait, what? But there are some people that would push for that. So I think what Jen is saying is that when you're talking about like a bodily autonomy thing, when they're saying you don't have bodily autonomy, they're saying they control your body.
Yeah.
Right. I totally understand. And like I said, I do think, it is, I do think women, if they want to, should have the option. But I'm just talking about the argument because I think this is such a case, like for, like a baby. I mean, this is such a case you can't really. It's hard to explain it. Hard to explain it with other examples.
Yeah.
I think.
They're removing your choice, I think,
Yeah.
is the thing. There's a choice involved here over that people expect with medical decisions, right? So there's a capacity, there's a medical procedure that is safe and effective, and so the question becomes, can I make this option, or can I not avail myself of this option? And what they're saying is the option is available, but you can't have it. And yeah, I guess it's like, but if they're going, you're kind of saying like, well, if they're going to ban drugs, could they force you to take drugs? And I'm kind of saying, I guess they could technically, right? I mean.
Right. I'm only talking about that argument. I mean, I'm saying if I were to give this argument to someone, they could, like they could say the same, that, okay, then if you ban murder, then you could also force someone to commit murder. Then why you not talk about the law banning murder, right? So I'm just saying that if I give this argument, then it's for me, they can break it,
Well, but we actually have examples of what happens when the government intrudes on one of the most personal decisions people will ever make, and that is whether and how many children to have. So
I see.
In, I guess, the 80s and maybe into the 90s, Romania had a policy where they wanted people to have at least 5 kids. So abortion was unavailable. You couldn't get one. You had to have 5 kids. And what we had was a crisis where all these kids were in these Romanian orphanages. And for the longest time, if you wanted a white European kid, if you had the money, you could get one from Romania. Well, a lot of these kids came out of these orphanages, and they had really severe psychological issues and failure to thrive, which is, a big medical issue. And it was because in these orphanages, there were so many kids that the caregivers didn't even have time to hold the children. And what we found out, partly as a result of some of this, is that human infants, really all primate infants, require close contact with a caregiver. If you don't have that, they don't develop normally. And so a lot of the kids that were adopted from these orphanages had really severe psychological issues with failing to bond with caregivers and stuff like that. And it wasn't anything that they did wrong.
Right.
It was just a product of the environment that they experienced as an early...
Right, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you had like China with the one-child policy, right, where they had all kinds of weird, horror stories coming out of there about coerced abortions and things like that, or late-term coerced abortions. And the question is really, and yes, a government can go either way. It can make you have kids. It can stop you from having kids. But the question is, do we want the government to make your reproductive decisions for you? Either way.
Right, you're very right. But also when if I talk to someone, they say that if you look at from that view, then yes, it is wrong, government. But here, government is trying to protect a baby.
Right,
so
but they could just as easily say we're going to look out for our population, overpopulating, and so we're going to control for that. So what I'm pointing out is that a reproductive decision has to do with bodily autonomy, right? I understand the example that you're making, and I think I even understand the problem that you're having with it, which is basically it's kind of like the argument that I will say sometimes where it's just like somebody will say, well, if you don't if you outlaw a thing, it doesn't really stop it. Like I made that with abortion, and I kind of joked about how it didn't stop it with drugs, and it wouldn't stop it with murder, right? So what you're basically saying, well, hey, Tracie, if you're going to use that argument, why outlaw murder? Because it's not going to stop it. People are still going to murder, right?
Yes.
But the difference is the question of, do we want me to go out and hurt other people versus do we want me to be able to make a decision about my own body? Not your body, but my own body, right? And so does the government tell me whether I can have a child or not? I do accept that the government should be able to tell me not to go out and kill other citizens. But I don't accept that they should be telling anybody to have or not have babies, right? That I don't think that they should be declining birth control from people, like not giving people access to birth control. I don't think that they should be limiting full options, right, for people to have. It's one thing to tell somebody, and this is why the issue with drugs is such a controversial issue, right? Because that's the whole argument, is this is something I'm doing to myself.
Right.
And usually what happens is people will say, but you get all messed up and then you go out and you do things and you're not responsible, right? Because your head's not there. And so then we have this issue of, well, we already have problems with like alcohol consumption and misuse and abuse and irresponsible behavior that ends up hurting other people. And if you release other drugs, you're going to exacerbate this problem because there's going to be a whole slew of these things to choose from. There's arguments to be made. I understand people that are afraid of it being legalized, and I also understand the arguments for legalizing. And a lot of it comes down to this idea of this is my body, right? My body. And when you're talking about a reproductive decision, this this is literally, do we want the government to control reproduction? Do we want the government to control murder? Yeah. Do we want the government to tell you how many kids you can have, or how many kids you have to have, or how many you can't have? Even though I'm like a big proponent of bringing down population, in general, I'm not even there, right? I'm not at the point where I want the government making that decision for you.
Well, and I
think sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you look worldwide, the countries that have the best outcomes in terms of quality of life are the countries where women are allowed to make those decisions.
Right, absolutely. But what I'm trying to say is that when I think about it, this is such a special case. It's you can't explain it with another example. For in this case, by exercising your rights, your reproductive right, you could also harm another a baby or person, right? See,
right,
because that's the that's why you don't have it in any other situation. They're separate, like killing somebody or making your own choice separate. But here, you could do it both at the same time.
But that's the point behind the whole bodily autonomy argument, and that is that even if you will die without the use of my body, it doesn't mean that I'm obligated to let you use my body.
Okay. What about again? This was not
the topic,
primary,
right? Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead. Lay your topic on us.
I have one other. So for this, this idea that you can't force me. You can't force me to, give you anything for you to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then the mother and father are. Like if I have children and I don't feed them, then I get in trouble for from the police.
Because
then why is that?
Because you're not required to use your body in order to care for your children, and these are autonomous children. They're not dependent on your body to survive, so you are required to provide reasonable care for them. And if you don't want to care for them, you can give them to someone else who will take care of them. Okay?
Okay.
No law requires you to...
So yeah, you become obligated to that child when you consent to be the parent, right?
Right.
And I'm gonna say that there's a lot of theoretical here, because I know our laws are not perfect around, parenting. But the point is, when a woman finds out she's pregnant, she then has to make that decision whether she's consenting to this or not. Right? You can't really make a decision about whether or not you want to give somebody blood, tissue, organs, like use of your body, unless it arises as a situation, right? So unless somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I need a kidney," you don't really have to stop and think about whether you'll lend this person a kidney. It's, I guess you could, but the point is, you have to consent before you're obligated as a parent, and you have to consent before you're obligated, I believe you have to consent before you're obligated to gestate and birth a child. And that consent can only happen when you have the situation where you're confronted with it and you say, whoa, do I want to proceed with this or not? Am I on board with this? Because you've got a person who's kind of getting a surprise, right? It's like, surprise, there's a person using your body. Are you okay allowing this? Are you going to let this go on or not? And at that point, she has to make a decision. But she hasn't actually, quote, been asked yet, right? Until she finds out that she's got a pregnancy.
So if somebody has sex for to become pregnant, knowing I want to, then you think they can't have abortion?
No, I would say that they could. It depends on what's going on with them. Not it depends on what's going on with them if they can or not. But what you're basically describing is a situation that would be really weird, right? Like, so I'm trying to have a baby, then I get pregnant, then I want to abort it. Does that happen, I guess?
Yes, later, because, somebody say that, you're probably not ready, or, but at the time she thought, yes, she's ready.
Yeah, you can change your
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
You can withdraw
can?
consent from
Okay.
things, and I frankly, although it gets into other, like I said, legal messy issues,
Okay.
I personally would be okay with somebody handing off their kid and assigning paternal or maternal rights to a child, like parenting rights to somebody else at any age. Like I would so much rather that somebody is raising that kid
Right.
that wants to than somebody that feels like they can't deal with it at whatever age it is.
Okay, I know this is it's one topic you could talk, a full show. So
And we are at the top of the hour, so we need to
Yeah, we are.
move on here.
Right. I want to talk about. I grew up. My parents are Muslim. Everybody, in my family Muslim, and when I read the book, the Quran, and the Sahih, meaning authentic Hadith, I have a lot of problems. And when I talk about these problems, they give me explanation, and sometimes it feels okay. Sometimes it doesn't. So in your show, a lot of times people come in and they tell their argument, and you tell them what is wrong. Okay, so for me, I will just tell them what my friends or the people in my community, when I talk to them, they say, you tell me what is wrong, okay, with the argument. All right, so I know from the what hadith is. At hadith, we call hadith.
Yes.
Is okay? So there are various degree of authentication. Some of the most authentic hadiths, they're collected in the Bukhari, Muslim. Now, in the Bukhari hadith, Prophet Muhammad's wife Aisha, she said that the Prophet married her when she was 6, and they had sex when she was at 9. And so I have a problem because I think Prophet Muhammad is an example for everybody, for all time, not for just when he was alive, for all time until the end of the world. But I have problem with people marrying or having sex with a 9-year-old. And so when I ask about it, they say that when he was alive, everybody did it. Everybody did, and God asked him to do it because she was very smart, and this way she lived a long life with the prophet, and could see what he was doing, and could narrate all the things he said. So there's a reason for it. My question: does it make him like a pedophile for marrying a girl child?
Yeah, I mean, she's prepubescent,
Yeah.
right? I mean, even at the age that you're giving for the sexual intercourse, that would be a prepubescent child, right? Like, you're not even talking about somebody that's likely gone through puberty at that point.
Yeah.
That's literally a child in any sense of the word. It's not even to a point where it's arguable. Like, there's not even at that point secondary sexual characteristics, or
Right.
there's no adult features, right? I mean, this is a 9-year-old, and I don't know how to justify that. I'm sorry that somebody put a bunch of people in a situation where they feel like they have to.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you understand that there's a problem there is probably pretty indicative of the fact that you understand that there's a problem there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you get it.
Yes, actually, I've heard from many other here in America that this even is in the authentic book, but they say it's the age is not authentic. The age could be 26, but they say it only where it's a problem, like people will think it's bad.
Yeah.
9. So if you go other places where it's okay, then you don't say that it's not the 9 because they
Right.
will.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, right? If I had my druthers, if people were going to believe this one way or the other, and I couldn't change that, I would so much rather be dealing with Muslims who say, I think it's wrong about the 9-year-old thing. I think she was more like in her mid-20s. I'd be way cooler with those Muslims than the Muslims who are like, no, man, it says she's 9, so it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, that would be the ones that kind of freak me out.
So do you think it make him a pedophile?
Yeah, that's kind of the definition.
It is, yeah.
A pedophile.
That's pedophilia. I mean, unless you're one of the people saying she was 26, who, you know, I'd go with them. Like if you're having, you know, questions and issues, you pretty much got a choice where you're going to be supporting pedophilia or you're going to go with it's a mistake. And I think I would tend toward it's a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, nowhere it says. It's 26 or 19. They say if you look at here, many things, and they say it could. But there is straight in the hadith. It actually says that she was 6 and she was 9 when the marriage was consummated. It actually says that, but the 26 doesn't say. So, problem for me is if he is the example for mankind for all time, then I cannot have a pedophile for as example.
Well, yeah.
Or ultimate. Example.
I'm gonna say
good for you.
Yeah, exactly. Good for you.
Okay. So then I have another one. The slavery in the Prophet Muhammad had slaves, and these are all from Quran and hadith, authentic hadith I read, and so he had he received girls as sex slaves as a gift from the ruler of Egypt, Misr, and also gave a sex slave to his son-in-law, his daughter's husband. But when I say this, why this is not right, and then my friends tell me that in that time, if they didn't have a slave, then they will not have a job, and they also. I said, okay, then why have a sex with them? And they said they also have the sexual need. So you're
helping them out.
So you're
giving them a job.
Yes.
And you're like, making sure that they're not, sexually bored.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a good thing for Islam. So what do you think about it?
I guess why not make them free and allow them to sell themselves sexually if they want to?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's why I say, but they say that it was Muhammad want to ban slavery, but because the economy was dependent on it, Muhammad also sold slaves.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an economy at one point that was kind of dependent on slavery too here in the U.S., but we took care of that.
Yeah,
it wasn't pretty.
So you would not give them. You would not you would not say that for him at that time it was okay.
No. I think there's a thing, right, where people say, oh, it was okay back then and it's not okay now. And all that really means is that there were some people that were cool with it back then. Generally, it's the people that weren't on the crap end of the stick.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't the slaves that were cool with it.
The slaves usually aren't okay with it, except maybe in relativistic terms, like maybe I'm a slave that's in a much better position than another slave, and so I feel okay in that position because it's relative. But in general, I think, I wouldn't like being a slave, and I would feel weird like owning human beings as property because it kind of denies them their humanity, right? I mean, isn't there anything about equality in the Quran?
For Muslim, yes, but you can have it's called ganimat. Ganimat is when you are at war and you defeat the people you were fighting, and then you can take their property, the children and the women as a loot, at the war loot, and then you can keep them. You can sell. Actually, there is one thing that kind of ties with the birth control. I think is the birth control is not permitted. But in one war, after one war, when the followers of Muhammad attacked the tribe Mustalik, and then they beat them, meaning they defeated them, and they killed the men and the women, and so they were having sex with them. But they had a question about if you can ejaculate inside them, because if they get pregnant, then they reduce the value for selling. So they came to Muhammad, and Muhammad said
that's interesting. So that's incentive for birth control, that your slaves are worth less if you get them pregnant. It's so amazing to me, like these things that religious folks come up with. Like, it's so interesting, and because sometimes I'm like, I would have never thought of that, right? Like, it took more imagination than I have to come up with that explanation. And I actually appreciate your call because it's so interesting to hear you kind of lay this out. I wish we had another hour just to hear you talk about these apologetics that you are familiar with. I understand you're not advocating for it. You're just sort of saying, hey, these are the things I have problems with.
But they always give me explanation, and and they think it's okay explanation.
But I mean, don't you, when you hear that, don't you just kind of think, yeah, but human beings aren't property? Like, they have agency and lives, and they have to be, like, don't you think that when you see another person, you respect kind of the fact that they're a human being like you're a human being, and that you see that kind of, equality of being between you and them? Right?
Yes, that's why I have a problem.
I totally get it. And I'm saying that that's kind of, that's something that some religions actually deal with, right? So in Christianity, despite the history of slavery and stuff, there's still this golden rule. And it may not be perfect, but the concepts behind these types of rules are all about recognizing the humanity in the other, right? So when it says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, there's this underlying narrative that says, recognize this person as a person. Yeah. And when you hear these other rules that are similar to that, like don't do things to people that you wouldn't want done to you, it's the same type. It's just trying to say, see yourself in some way in this other person, be able to see yourself in this person. And we do have, there's science behind this, right? Like infants that recognize human faces before they recognize other types of faces. There's like other studies that show that animals, and you don't even need a study really to show that an animal recognizes members of its own species many times the more social it is, right? Like, for example, animals wouldn't know which other animals to mate with, for example. Right. Like how would a bear know to mate with another bear if it couldn't recognize other bears as like, as the thing that is like them. You can call it what you want, and I'm not saying that I speak for how a bear does it or views it, But there is this thing that, to me, these religions and these philosophies and these laws are kind of stating a thing that is it's descriptive, not proscriptive, right? They sound like they're being proscriptive, and they're put forward like that, like God tells you to treat everybody like you would be treated. But really, what's happening is the religion is looking at it and saying, I recognize that this happens between people. And what is this? This is some recognition of ourselves in others.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's being acknowledged. And that's how we're a social species. And I think that's how, that's to me, when you start to undermine the person's humanity, that's how atrocities happen, right?
Yep.
When you start saying that a human being is an object or a human being is less human than me,
right.
it's a recipe for some danger.
Yeah, and I would argue that sort of dehumanization process is essential to committing atrocities against other people.
Or having slaves.
Yeah, exactly. Which I consider one of the worst atrocities throughout human history, because you can't. Basically, in order to do that to another human being, you have to overcome our evolutionary history as social animals and that empathy that we have for other human beings.
Okay. Yes, I could. There are lots of things, and I know it's a limited call, so I will just say one thing. Okay. And the reason I call is because, like I said, I just wanted to see the same explanation how you take it, and about the slavery. My friends say that Prophet Muhammad wanted to get rid of slavery, but then I said, why you yourself have slaves? You didn't have to have slaves,
right?
And so I see another person from Pakistan, Brother Saad.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing about one thing he said, and then I will just go. So he said about the Quran being unchanged, and it's the exact word of God, but there are a few versions of Quran. Actually, right now, the number of verses in Quran, there's discrepancies. Some say it is 6,666, some 6,200. And the people that think their Quran is the right Quran is unchanged. They think it is unchanged, and the other party is not really Muslim.
Sounds like arguments with Christians. With Christians,
I was thinking
Bible translations.
I was wondering if it wasn't the Christians that were saying there was 6,666.
Yeah,
that's who started that rumor.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks.
I would just say one thing. There was a hadith in that where the Prophet's wife Aisha described that a verse came to Muhammad, and here they had written down in the bark of a tree, and when they were looking, a goat came and ate it, the verse, and so that verse is missing from the Quran.
Ah, interesting.
Wow.
So yes, so it is not a complete if that hadith is true.
You know what though? If I was a god and I was writing a book and I sent a verse just to a 9-year-old and they wrote it down and I was just like, yeah, that's crap, I would probably send a goat to go eat it.
Yeah,
right?
there
Like,
you
I
go.
mean, how many ways can you edit? Right?
Yeah.
Like, you're the god, you just send a goat to eat it. Because I would think that if you're a god and you didn't want the goat to eat it, you'd be like, oh man, something needs to happen to that goat before he eats it, right? Like, have a heart attack, goat, right? Or something.
Send another verse that says sacrifice the goat.
Because you are a woman, you really like it what was in the verse. Because in Islam, if you drink or anyone drinking the breast milk from women, you cannot marry. And so Allah said that if you have somebody in your house that is not a mahram is somebody you cannot marry. If it's not mahram and wants to be in the house, then you could feed that person the breast milk, and then a mother-son relationship is created. So now it is okay for the person to stay in the house.
So it's like women are tricking the guy into drinking breast milk so he can stay because he's like her son now?
Not tricking. That's the.
Oh, they do it on purpose, like everybody knows.
On purpose, yes, on purpose.
Oh, okay.
One time there was a slave who was a little, and then when the slave became an adult, and the slave owner went to Prophet Muhammad, said, he's adult now, and he's still stay in my house, but in my house I have my wife, and he is not mahram, he's from outside. What do I do? So Prophet Muhammad said, okay, have the slave drink the breast milk, and so now he can stay.
Because that guy can be around your wife now, and there's no threat. That's a thinker.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the.
He'll be like, "That's my mom. I can't do anything to her now."
Yeah.
Right.
Wow, that is trippy. That is trippy.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was very interesting.
It was.
Wow, I could listen to those stories all day.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, this is like, I could read a book of this. That was pretty interesting.
That was pretty good.
All right, and we're gonna wrap with Mitch in Ohio about how to talk to religion to other people. You're on with Tracie and Jen.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
You sound good.
Oh, that's a surprise. I know you guys are probably hungry, so I'm not going to take much of your time. So.
Yeah, the Chinese food is here, so be quick.
Oh, there's Chinese?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what's up, Mitch? Mitch?
Well.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know. I have this. Is it possible for atheists to be scared of religious people? Because I don't know. I used to be religious myself, but.
What do you mean be scared of religious people? Like scared in what context?
Well, when I come out as an atheist, people still tell I'm going to hell or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I'm scared to get that response.
Do you believe in hell?
Yeah.
You do?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Okay. So
the fear is just about the condemnation that you'd be getting from people you know. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's abusive. I mean, if you think about it in those terms, it might be a little easier to deal with it. I mean, people put up with a lot of crap from friends and family when they come out as atheists. And I guess what I'm going to do is give you permission to not put up with that crap.
I mean, it sounds like you're having you're clearly invested in this, right? So you kind of have to think in terms, if you can think in terms of this in a more objective way. Think about it in terms of what if this was someone else and not you, right? Let's think, for example, that your friend comes to you and they're like, man, I told my parents that I don't believe in this religion. And their response was that they think I deserve to be tortured forever and that I deserve to die. I mean, what would you think about that?
Stupid. It's pretty stupid.
What would you tell your friend, though?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've had this discussion with them once, and I don't know.
But I mean, what would you think about your friend's parents? What does that say about them and what they just said to him? What would you tell him?
Man, you're making me think about this.
Well, sometimes sometimes if you feel really it's real close to home for you because you're thinking of your own situation, sometimes it really helps to think, what if the person who was telling you this was 13, right? And they went to their parents and they said, I don't know if I believe this or not. I don't think I believe it. And the mother and father are like, you deserve to die. You deserve to be tortured forever for that. What would you think about those parents? And what would you tell that child?
Well, they're kind of immoral, I guess.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and what do you tell the kid?
Mean, telling your child that they're going to burn in hell is kind of an immoral thing to say.
Yes.
Right. It's horrible. And when we think about it, and it's in our own context, it's sometimes hard to to see all the aspects of it. When you look at it and you say, what if I saw somebody doing this to somebody else, right? So sometimes if you're in a situation where you're being abused, you kind of look at it like it's not that bad, it's not a big deal. But when you see somebody abusing your friend, you get really defensive, right? And you're just like, wait a minute, what did they just say to you? What did they just do to you? Like, I know I personally sometimes take a lot more crap than I am comfortable watching somebody take. Like, I'll see somebody else and I'll just be like, no, you know, and I see myself and it's like, well, and we kind of all do that, right? So, I mean, a lot of us do it. And so for you, you're basically in this thing and you're looking at it from this very personal perspective. And what I'm trying to do is say, get your head out of there and think about it in terms of what if it was someone else? And what would you feel and what would you think and what would you see in that case?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that helps.
I don't know. It seems like religion uses it as a fear to get people to believe it.
Yes.
Sure it does.
Yes, it's a psychological manipulation tool.
Yeah, and let me tell you, your fears are not unfounded when it comes to will they throw this at me, right? I mean, yeah, they might. And I've known people who are atheists whose families come from authoritarian hellfire religions who after they
I don't know, when I came out as an atheist to my father, he said that I'm getting like Satan's filling my head up with those lies, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I don't
and the
believe
thing
in
is,
Satan, but okay.
That's his indoctrination at work.
Can I ask, do you live independently or do you live with your parents?
I still live with my parents, unfortunately.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, that makes it a little tougher.
Yeah, that is tough. So
being 22 years old and trying to get out of the house is kind of hard.
No, I understand.
Nowadays.
I understand. People who have situations. So you're, but I guess my question is, you're living with them, and I think it sounds like you're kind of saying things could get more tense if you come out to them. Is that probably a correct thing to say or not?
Yeah, well, I think they already know what I am.
So are they like hammering you over this, or are you catching flack already?
No, they're pretty, like at first when I came out, they were kind of mad about it, but then they got over it, I guess.
Okay. So at this point, what's the impetus to push this again?
I don't know.
Is it possible to not push it again, or do you feel is there something motivating you to want to have this conversation with them again?
I don't know. It kind of interests me, I guess.
Right, but there might be better people to talk to about it if it's just an interesting thing to discuss than the two people who hold really, really different views and who will condemn you and that you have to live with. Right? I mean, just a thought.
Yeah.
So is there a secular group near you? Like what I don't want to ask.
I live out in the middle of bum-ass Ohio, and you know how Ohio is right now. Okay,
so then maybe your outreach is going to be more of an online thing.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not near any cities, if you can't like get to any kind of metropolis, you might want to reach out to find the next closest city, reach out to that group that would be like the nearest humanist, secular, atheist like group that's in that area, and kind of let them know that you have to have someone to talk to, and just be like, "What can you help me out? Because I've really got to have someone to talk to."
Yeah.
If there's online atheist forums, that would also be a good thing, right, for you to find a place where you can actually exchange with other atheists on this, because it sounds like what you need is like a place to vent. I mean, it sounds like you're looking
for... That's why I always fall into the Atheist Experience shows, because, that's the only outlet I got.
Well, I think you need something more... Yeah. What's the, like more solid, right, than calling this show. Not to say that you're not welcome to call the show. I'm just saying that it sounds like
the show's pretty entertaining though at times. So
yeah, but you need more available support, right? Forums are a better method. I have not been to an atheist forum in so long. I feel at a loss to offer one. But I'll tell you, I don't know, I'll tell you what. There's this sounds like a blog people, question. We have a blog that's at, let me just find it. I think it's, let me find Free Thought Blogs here. So our blog address.
Go to the blog.
Yeah, it's at freethoughtblogs.com/AXP. Now, when you first post, if you haven't posted before, your comment needs to be moderated, okay? So you will need to go and moderate. and I mean, I will need to moderate, or somebody needs to moderate. So you'll post a comment. It won't show up immediately. It doesn't mean that it's not showing up. It means that somebody has to go and release it. And it might take a day or two for someone to do that. But even if you don't post, I'm going to do a shout out to the folks at the blog and just say, under this show thread for today's show, if you have forums that you can vouch for that are like atheist forums that would be a good support for Mitch here, go ahead and put those links in. Like feel free to pimp those forums.
Yeah.
Because he needs some real interaction here, and he needs somebody that he can talk to so that he doesn't start getting into it with his parents while he's living in their house and they're being really oppressive.
Oh, we've gone into it once, and it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, and you don't need that. You don't need
Yeah.
that every time you feel like an urge to talk about who you are.
And Mitch, the fact that they are not pushing this anymore may be that they just don't want to talk about it anymore. That may be their only way of letting you know they value their relationship with you more than they value their religion. So,
Yeah, that's a good thing, I guess.
yeah.
That's the optimist way to look at it. So yeah, why not, right? Like, sure. And yeah, so we'll try to get you some forums at those links. Like I said, people hit the blogs. You can help this person. Let's see some help.
Yeah.
And get him some links. And in the meantime, Mitch, feel free to go to the blog and just say, hey, this is Mitch. I was the caller on the show looking for forums. I live in Ohio.
Well, I called in before,
Okay.
way back when, to talk about sleep paralysis, but that was way back when.
Okay.
That's fine. Okay. I think that's the best we can do, because I've got nothing as a resource, but I'm sure there are resources, and so I've basically put the call out for people to get you resource links. And so I would say visit the blog, give it, and post if you want to. I'll check and make sure that you get your comment through. And that's hopefully we can find somebody that can get you hooked up with a group of people online that can help you out with giving you an interesting area to talk about your views and who you are. Because we all need a space to talk about who we are, where we're not addressing people who oppress and, you know, and attack us and tell us things that are really negative and crappy about ourselves. We like to have a place where we can go and feel welcome and, safe. All right.
I'll let you eat Chinese food.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, and again, let you go, Mitch, but just to people out there, we're on Koenig Lane. It's the Free Thought Library. Feel free to come on down. Apparently it's Chinese tonight, which I'm not, can't complain about that.
Yeah.
And so come on down. Thanks to the audience. Thanks to my co-host, Jen.
Yeah,
Thanks to the people out there on the internet. Thanks
Yeah.
to the folks behind the screen, right? Like our production folks. There they are.
There they are.
Yeah. All right. And with that, we will see you, next time. Same bat channel.
All right.